All right, so I have Josephine Broussard with me on the left and Diane Weiskittle on the right, and I'm going to ask them strategies they used when they were students to learn civil procedure.
One of the first things that I did is something you've probably already heard from Professor Cox, and that is reading examples and explanations. That for me was key. It told me in plain everyday English what my cases were trying to tell me, and I found it incredibly helpful to read both the text and walk through the actual sample problems, which brings me to my next suggestion, and that is definitely do sample test questions, work through sample essay problems. You don't realize where your problem areas are until you try to apply the rules of law that you're learning in the class. So work it out now as opposed to on a real final exam. So do those practice problems and then compare your answer either in examples and explanations to the ones that are given, or ask one of the TAs to give you feedback on your answer. We'd definitely be happy to do that in our office hours. The last thing I would say that was particularly helpful to me was in the ACING Civ Pro book, there are a lot of checklists, particularly when I got to jurisdiction, which I realize you're not there yet, but you'll get there. I was desperate for sort of a process that I could follow to be sure I was walking through things and thinking through things correctly. And the way that the ACING supplement is set up, it does give you sort of a checklist format to help you think through problems. And I found those incredibly helpful and used those checklists when I was doing my sample exams, and even brought those checklists with me into Professor Cox's final exam.
Well, now that you've said everything, I would also add, not add, but really probably just reinforce examples and explanation. I don't know that I could have done well in that class without that book, because even after going to class and you walk away and you feel like you understand the material, and you go into examples and explanation and you start looking at some of the problems and the way the problems get twisted, and you can't cover everything in class. You know, that time away with examples and explanation gives you those extra things that are not necessarily always covered, or the areas that might be tricky that you don't understand are a little tricky. So I say E&E is a must, not even an option. Also, I did some of the Cali lessons online, specifically for preclusion. I did that, and I would miss those questions over and over again, and I was like, oh, so depressed. And I emailed Diane. I was like, oh, I just can't get this. Don't give up. It comes together. You just have to keep working through the issues and work through the examples and explanation and hypos as well. For me, also, in terms of outlining, I tried to think about it as in the life of a complaint from beginning to end. So I had a lot of graphs and I had a lot of tables in my outline. Now, tables may not work for everyone, but for me it helped kind of see things. I had a big circular, you know, this is where the complaint starts, this is how it goes through summary judgment, and I had tables that broke it out, because sometimes civil procedure is just a lot of rules, and if you just have an outline with just a whole list of rules, that's confusing. It just does nothing for me. So I needed tables, and I made tables where I could put it in my own word and just see in a practical sense, you know, what we were learning in terms of the rules laid out in a graph or a table. And if you're not into tables or graphs, then I would say write the rules, but put them in your own words so that they make sense. And definitely, like Diane said, practice exams. I can't tell you how many times I had an outline or a topic that I thought I understood really well, even after going through examples and explanation, and I would do a practice hypo or a practice exam and realize that I didn't understand something, and that was the opportunity to go and get clarification, not when you're in the middle of an exam.